Hey folks, welcome back to Game Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today, well, it's really early in the morning. I've been poring over this already for over an hour, but I think I'm ready to present. So we're going to talk about the Subnautica 2 lawsuit and the update between the three leads and Krafton. And this has been going on since, June, July of last year in 2025. So it's almost been a year. There's still another phase to happen, but phase one has been concluded with the lawsuit. Judge has made her determination and what's going to happen going forward. So we're going to go over all of that. The thing that I think is interesting that I want to point out too is that Krafton has twisted things, of course, which I was definitely wrong about. I had been siding with Krafton because to say all of the things that they were saying and for all of it to be false didn't make sense. The facts themselves were accurate, but they were spun in a way to show that they were correct, as most companies do. So I've been waiting for the facts for a long time, and we finally have them, and we're going to go over a lot of them. I will also link this website here so you can read like a really short version. But I actually want to include a lot more of the facts than just what most of the articles and videos are showing so far, because I think it's I think it's important to have the entire context of what happened. But anyway, just want to go over this, and yeah, this is combined opinion of the judge, and this was actually just released on March 16th, so it's really not that old. Okay, so the equity purchase agreement. On October 29th, 2021, Krafton and Unknown Worlds entered into an equity purchase agreement, or EPA, and Krafton purchased 100% of Unknown Worlds' outstanding equity for $500 million upfront payment. Key employees and other, which were the three leads, and other Unknown Worlds team members also became eligible for $250 million earnout payment, which is what all of this is really about. Performance-based earnout is determined by Unknown Worlds revenue through December 31st of 2025, and this was all based on the early access that was supposed to show up last year, but is now supposed to be showing up in 2026. There's also an option to extend the earnout period through June of 2026 if Unknown Worlds surpass the revenue threshold of $69.8 million. Krafton must pay $3.12 for each additional dollar of revenue granted, up to $250 million. EPA grants them operational control, the main three leads, in all material aspects. Their control rights endure so long as any of the key employees remained employed at Unknown Worlds. So the other two could leave or work on something else, which is ultimately what happened. We're going to go through that as long as just one primarily was in charge. They agreed to devote substantially all of their business time and efforts to Unknown Worlds. So again, while they were on the clock, that's what they should be doing. But yeah, this is where some of it gets a little confusing. So post-closing rules. After the acquisition closed, Moonbreaker received the bulk of the founders' focus, as it had for several years. Cleveland was not entirely divorced from Subnautica, however. Under Krafton's encouragement, he explored opportunities for a Subnautica film or a TV adaptation and this transmedia strategy. Krafton was enthusiastic about Moonbreaker's progress and Subnautica's strong revenue generation. The honeymoon was short-lived. In September of 2022, Unknown Worlds released Moonbreaker into early access. The game failed to find a sustainable audience, and I think this is when a lot of it is soured because they poured years into making this. It's also partly why the $500 million was actually paid to acquire Unknown Worlds. It wasn't just about Subnautica, which was the primary, but it was also about Moonbreaker, and this is what's happened too with Bungie at this time with Sony. For Cleveland, the failure was profound. Burnout and heartsick, Cleveland admitted to his colleagues in late 2023 in a retreat in Italy that he had hit a wall. So he stayed behind for several more weeks after they went home, and he stepped away from the studio's daily operations to focus on his mental health. This break was not kept from Krafton. So Krafton was informed of this. They knew about this. We're also going to hear about Park pretty often, who was basically the intermediary between Krafton and the studio leads at Unknown Worlds, and was keeping them informed. Cleveland took an extended leave to recover. While he was away, Unknown Worlds began early development of Subnautica 2. Cleveland returned from his leave in early of 2024, so he was gone for quite a while. I definitely want to make. So yeah, leave of 23, right? That was the retreat. Took several weeks and then took an extended leave to actually recover and came back in early 2024. So took several months off. He shared with family and friends that he was no longer making video games. Limited his work hours to about 4 hours a week to lead Subnautica film adaptation. He he viewed this not as an abandonment of his job, but a strategic transmedia pivot. So he was going to focus on the movie aspect and things after Moonbreaker, while Gil and the others were still working on Subnautica 2. At the same time, Cleveland assumed his mentoring of the game development team and saw that it was a bit lost on Subnautica 2. Cleveland urged Kalina to build a holistic prototype, but he maintained his boundary of not leading game development and respecting the team's autonomy. By the spring of 2024, McGuire confided in Gil and Cleveland that he wanted to quit Unknown Worlds. Gil recognized, who was the lead over Unknown Worlds at the time, recognized McGuire's value, encouraged him to stay on in a different role that McGuire found meaningful. Gil reminded McGuire, which I think the real reason is, that the financial adjustment to the earnout threshold would be made if McGuire were to quit. So yeah, he didn't want to reduce the payout, and I don't think it wasn't about the money, like at all. He just wanted to be done and move on, because yeah, it'd been so messed up by Moonbreaker not finding an audience. In the spring of 24, McGuire teamed up with Cleveland to build a prototype of Subnautica 2 to help guide the team. Also, Cleveland was working on building a Hollywood network and also dabbled in other film ideas. He was open about these efforts, both with Krafton and was also open with it publicly. Krafton leadership accepted these efforts because the film experience would serve as a stepping stone to a successful Subnautica movie. So again, all of Krafton's arguments that they've had about the abandonment and working on movies and everything, again, that none of that was factually wrong. It's just that they spun it in a way to make it look bad, right, as part of their argument, right, which is what we expect most people to do when they don't want to pay money. McGuire's shift was also disclosed to Krafton. So again, Krafton knew what exactly was happening with the three leads, the studio, the game development, all of that. They weren't left in the dark at all. As Cleveland and McGuire's new roles took shape, the Subnautica team hit its stride under Gil's leadership. And Gallegos, I apologize, Gallegos' creative vision. It underwent incredible transformation that made up for the project's slow development timeline. In May of 2025, Cleveland's playtested the latest build. So again, things were going very, very well after Moonbreaker. Development was going strong. There was good leadership. The team was working well together. Things were going great. Early access, the team was targeting around August of 2025 for the initial release. In April, Krafton greenlit a trailer announcing that the game would launch in early access later in 2025, which I was excited for. And we're still going to play this when it comes out, whether it's on Game Pass or not. In May of 25, the party scheduled a milestone review meeting. Now, this was very pivotal. Their models predicted that the successful August 25 early access launch of Subnautica 2 with over 1.67 million copies sold by Q4 of 2025 and would likely trigger the earnout. Best case scenario indicated that up to $242.2 million would be paid out with this payout that was agreed to in the APA. This captured the attention of the CEO, Kim, and felt that Krafton had overpaid. Because, $500 million plus another possible $250 was kind of insane. He feared that the earn-out payment would earn him a reputation as a pushover. So, ultimately he got to work. Gallegos showed Krafton's executives the latest build, which showed great progress. Gil and Cleveland advocated for support of the planned August 14th release, but some Krafton executives claimed that the game was not ready for release. Krafton's Oliveira, I apologize for the names, told a colleague that he was starting to think that people were trying to create excuses to not pay the earnouts. This would have been around May of 2025. Kim complained that the EPA was a bad deal and felt taken advantage of, but still, it's an agreement that was agreed to, and there's nothing he can do about it. On June 2nd, Park warned Kim over Slack, which is an app, that a dismissal with cause would not eliminate their earnout obligation, exposing Krafton to lawsuit and reputation risk. So Kim turned to ChatGPT for help. This was Project X. At ChatGPT's suggestion, Kim formed the internal task force, and mandate was to either negotiate a deal on the earnout or execute a takeover of Unknown Worlds. On June 4th, Yoon circulated a plan outlining next steps after having a discussion with Kim. That Krafton was in the process of eternal alignment, and a draft announcement that Krafton would make Unknown Worlds fans, suggesting that Subnautica 2 would be delayed and that Cleveland and McGuire had been uninvolved in the game. June 5, Krafton continued to put Gil off. Gil explained that Krafton had become non-responsive with launch planning, leaving Unknown Worlds with zero progress on many key initiatives. He received no response. Gil wasn't getting anything from Krafton in June, and this was, again, directly after the meeting in May. And then Krafton was spinning it that two of the three basically were not involved, right? Which, generally speaking, was true. There was a whole nother team with Gil working and Galagos working on the game. But again, it was spun in a way to make it look bad. On June 12th, Krafton posted a message to the Unknown Worlds and Subnautica websites. We have asked the series creators, Cleveland and McGuire, to once again helm the journeys of Subnautica 2, and also stated falsely that Charlie and Max were considering Krafton's invitations, which was not accurate. Gil and the Unknown Worlds team were shocked since they had nothing to do with the message. So again, Krafton was just doing this on their own, not communicating with Unknown Worlds or the team. Second, Krafton secured control points. Krafton locked down Steam publishing rights to ensure Unknown Worlds could not publish Subnautica 2. Third, Krafton prepared systemic materials for legal defense. So yeah, they knew this was coming. Krafton's seizure of Steam and other systems forced Gil to the negotiating table, and they began to discuss a solution, including having the key employees transition out of Unknown Worlds and settle on an earnout to some amount. So basically make it lower, which is ridiculous because the EPA, again, had already been signed, and that was already agreed to by both parties, Krafton and the three leads. Negotiations ultimately stalled, and Yoon told Kim on June 27 it might actually be easier to just do a takeover. Kim responded, set a date. So we had the terminations. On July 1st of 2025, Krafton set termination letters. And then we also had the data downloads, which we heard about. This was actually a second lawsuit, which I'm not sure if really is going to go through anymore. If it does, it'll be very, very short. And this was Unknown World Studio versus Fortis representing the three leads for basically taking a bunch of information and all of that. But yeah, this will cover some of that. So let's keep going. With anticipation of further escalation, the team leads, initiated large-scale data downloads of Unknown Worlds company files and data. Other than the personal files deleted by Cleveland, the key employees subsequently returned all of the downloaded files to Krafton upon its request. And again, we didn't really have like a public update from that. So yeah, I'm glad that we actually have this written by the judge that's overseeing this. It is said to, which I didn't highlight this, but while I'm scrolling, it is said to in here that while the judge believes that should not have been done, it was not to necessarily be malicious. It was basically to get leverage and protect their own position within the company because they knew what was happening to them was wrong and incorrect, and that Krafton was screwing them over. A lot of this stuff that I'm scrolling past is just what's already been presented starting in last year with all of the lawsuits and stuff. So most of us are probably up to date on that. If you're not, I will leave some of these vids at the end screen if you're interested. So now we're at a point where we're talking about the end of everything and what's going to happen going forward. So even with the equitable extension of the testing period, the litigation is not over. There's still remaining open questions. One, Krafton breached its promise to not take any action with the primary business purpose of depriving the sellers of the earnout, right? That was part of the EPA. And then also whether Fortis is entitled to money damages for earnout revenue permanently lost due to Krafton's breach and litigation delays, because this has created a whole mess. It screwed up the pipeline. Now the studio of Unknown Worlds has been able to polish some of the early access and probably even put a little bit more in there, which ultimately is going to be better for us. But two, with all of this happening and going down, um, then the possibly other games too coming out later this year in 2026, it's probably going to mess up a little bit of the launch, and so they might be entitled to actual pay for revenue. Because they were looking, they had their projections already that they shared in May of last year, and this will all be resolved. These two questions will be resolved in phase 2. So the conclusion: judges entered in favor of Fortis on its phase 1 claims. Krafton breached the EPA by terminating the key employees without valid cause and by improperly seizing operational control of unknown worlds. To remedy these breaches, Fortis is entitled to specific performance, which is basically money. Gill is hereby reinstated as CEO of Unknown Worlds. I think that's actually, I'll say that out. I'm not sure what specific performance is. I'm not a lawyer. EPA will be extended by the time that elapsed between its wrongful termination and his restoration. Krafton is enjoined from impeding Gill's authority over the early access launch of Subnautica 2 and must immediately restore his access to the Steam platform. Base earnout testing period is also equitably extended by 258 days to September 15th of 2026, which they're not going to hit. Fortis remains its contractual right to further extend the testing period to March 15 of 2027, which I think is a lot more possible or whatever. I'm tired, guys. I'm boring over this forever. And I think we'll see, again, Krafton has shared publicly that it will be sometime in 2026. We can probably expect that. Again, we're probably looking at August again. Why wouldn't they just try another August release date? There's more stuff coming down the pipe. It'll be the end of summer. They'll get some feedback until they get like GTA 6, right? That's coming later this year in November. So they'll have some months maybe, and there will be some other games. But yeah, GTA 6 is going to be huge. So they're going to want some time before that so they can actually get some feedback before that game comes out. And then, their testing period can go through March 15 of 2027. It is also normal within an early access that you'll have 2 to 3 years before the actual full relaunch version 1.0 of the real game. We've gotten to see this with Pal World. We've gotten to see this with Path of Exile 2 and other games. Early access also is not a guarantee of an actual game coming out, like Ashes of Creation. That's a great example right now. But we can probably expect a full release in 27 or 28 would be my guess. Because, they've been working on it. They'll continue to do so until basically they agree, Gill and Krafton agree that it's ready. Within 3 business days, so again, this was put out on the 16th, parties are directed to confer and submit a process form of partial judgment implementing this decision. Basically, giving operational control, setting things back to normal, back in motion, things going forward, where like this can basically be over, right? Except for phase 2. We're still going to have to go through that. In addition to the matters remaining of phase 2, the court will retain jurisdiction. So this will stay in Delaware. And the judge will probably continue to preside over this. So I know that was lengthy. Thank you for your patience, but I think it's important getting a lot of the details out there and not just completely leaving out stuff with Krafton. Even though with what Krafton did is awful, I think it's good to have a full context of what did happen, of what's transpired, of why some things actually took place over the last several years, why the litigation has happened, and some of the pivotal points with what's happened with Subnautica 2 development, Unknown Worlds, and Krafton. So, but Krafton is just showing again that ultimately they are in my opinion, a really sucky publisher. I mean, they screwed over Striking Distance with Callisto Protocol. They also have bought Tango Gameworks, and we haven't heard a single thing from them, which I think is horrible. That made Hi-Fi Rush. They bought them from Xbox. And then, now we have this. So, Krafton is not my favorite publisher. I will be honest. I hope, they can get some new leadership at Krafton, remove some of those dudes and gals, and actually get some real people in there to help the studios make their games instead of just trying to control everything. Because then we could probably get some good games coming out. So, anyway, Subnautica 2 is coming. Early access is going to show up this year, and we'll cover it here on the channel. And two, I just want to make a note for myself personally. While I believed what Krafton was saying, something still didn't quite fit. But, you know, with the evidence that we had at the time, yeah, I still went with Krafton because some of that information was pretty damning. But what we're finding out now with how they spun it, yeah, Krafton is definitely at fault. And I don't think it helps that Maguire was broken over Moonbreaker because, again, he poured years into that. But yeah, that didn't help with the further development and kind of the stumbling that happened with Unknown Worlds after that. So yeah, it took some time for them to get on their feet, and that wasn't overly helpful. But luckily, Gil was able to bring things around and get things on their feet and get the development going. Things were looking good. And then Krafton's in May when they had their review meeting. Oh, yeah, we don't really want to pay that. We've already spent a lot of money and we don't want to pay another $200 and potentially $50 million to you guys. Because, yeah, $750 million for Unknown Worlds is pretty insane. We're talking almost $1 billion. And they've also been paying for the continued development and support of the studio and all of this. Anyway, and as far as I know, there hasn't been any layoffs at Unknown Worlds. There's maybe been a few, but it's not like a big, major layoff. So, anyway, we'll see how Subnautica 2 is. With that, folks, thanks for tuning in. You can always follow me at GamingGarbage22 over at YouTube. Various content every single week, and if something's not for you, don't worry about it. Just skip right on through to the next thing. Also, we're going to be starting Crimson Desert very, very soon on the 19th. Literally tomorrow. Holy cow. And yeah, I'll be streaming that on Twitch at Don't Turn On Thee if you'd like to follow me there. I will be streaming it on Xbox on the Series X. But yeah, I'm excited for Crimson Desert, so you can watch me there. And if I've earned it, like, sub, all that jazz, share, and hype, and whatever else there is anymore. I'm getting old. Start to keep up with it all. But ultimately, you guys are what promote the channel, and I appreciate everything that you guys do. Yeah, let's keep the channel growing. We're heading toward 1,000. We're getting close to 700 already, which is crazy. So with that, folks, we'll see you guys on the next one.